started. So, welcome everyone. It's been terrific to see you all dialing in. My name is Natalie Ashdown from the Open Door Coaching Group, and welcome to our Coaching Cafe today, where we are talking about setting up successful performance conversations with a coaching approach. And I'm joined on the line by super coaches from all around the Australia and internationally, all the alumni joining us, but especially joined by the fabulous Bridget Calvert and the amazing Paula Jones Hunt. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, so before we begin, let me acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands on which we are all meeting today across the many lands of Australia and internationally. I acknowledge traditional owners and custodians of those lands and on which we're meeting today and their continuing connection and connection to the land and the waters and the communities of Australia and internationally, paying our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and anyone who might be on the line from an Indigenous descent. With that in mind, let's turn to our agenda. And we are in annual performance review season. June is, it's turned cold here in Melbourne. It's 6 degrees this morning. That means it's winter, and the annual performance season is upon us in many organisations. So that's the topic of our conversation. We want to talk about kicking off this season for success, and we're going to be focusing on this for the next 4 or 5 coaching cafes, so a bit of a series that you can connect with us around. We want to talk today about why it's so important that we set these conversations up for success, and Paula and Bridget are here to give you some key tips. But I can see all the people on the line and I'm looking at you, and you can definitely jump in and give us your key tips as well. There's a lot of experience on the line today. If you are new to the Coaching Cafe, welcome. We are all about creating a community. We're about sharing learned experiences and having thought-provoking conversations. We come together at this time every Friday, nearly every week. And if you are interested in your ICF CCEUs, because you're collecting those, yes, they're offered for free and they're available at the end of the session. So if you're new, welcome. If you're a regular, we have many regulars on our Coaching Cafe listening to us live. Welcome back to you. Thanks for sharing your experience, jumping into the comments. We'll pick your comments up as we go along. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast service, whilst you're out and about, that's wonderful as well. I hope you can reflect with us as we go. So there we are. So let's talk about why are these performance conversations so important. And I'm bringing up the slide which Paula and Bridget, I always come back to. This was the original slide that I found, back in 2002. It's very old now, but it actually talked about the maximum impact of on performances. So in the change in performance, the maximum impact of a performance review on employees' performances. And it will be no surprise to people on the line at all that if we only focus on weaknesses in performance conversations or personal weaknesses, then that actually gives us a 26.8% decrease in performance. And in actual fact, I think it's a lot more. I think that people, if they've only been focusing on their weaknesses, and this is the first time that we've heard about it from my manager, I'm completely demotivated. I'm not pumped up to do anything for the rest of the week, in fact. Whereas we talk about emphasis on performance strengths, and we are going to spend a full webinar talking about coaching to performance strengths. 36.4% uplift in performance. So I think this is our first major point that we want to bring across, Paula and Bridget. It's around how we manage these performance reviews and conversations so that we have a maximum impact on uplift in performance. Would you care to comment on that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is really important to, shift away from that almost remedial type of conversation where you're focusing potentially on, people's weaknesses or what they're doing wrong or what they're not doing, as opposed to what they are doing well. And for that person to sort of buy into that conversation and take responsibility is to have part of that conversation. So the emphasis on performance strengths, I think, is really important to focus on what they are doing well. Instead of focusing on that high performance impact rather than what they're not doing well.
And it sounds logical, doesn't it, Bridge? And I totally agree with you. And I know the great coaches on the line will be going, that is obvious. But you know, just yesterday, I was coaching an executive who has had 5 different managers in the last 5 years. And her last performance conversation was mostly focused on weaknesses. We did a 360 review with that person and found out she is a great leader. It's just that the manager, when they did the review, really focused on her weaknesses, and she's lost confidence. She's questioning whether she's a good leader at all. But the actual 360 review came out quite differently. That manager's gone, by the way. So the 360 review has come out quite differently again.
Yeah, I think it's really important, as you say, if you're focusing on the strengths, not forgetting about, things that potentially might need to shift or lift or change. But essentially, if we're focusing on that strength-based perspective, then you're going in with that growth mindset. You're believing that person can. If they need to make changes, they can. So it's shifting the way we approach that conversation.
Absolutely. And Paula, you eat these kind of statistics for breakfast. A focus on strengths during performance conversations, lifts, shifts, raises people's performance. But look at those statistics: 36% increase in productivity, 73% improvement in engagement, a decrease in staff turnover, 11% reduction in absenteeism. I know these kind of statistics, you eat those for breakfast. Paula, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it always comes back to me with any meeting or any conversation you're having as a staff member is, what is my intent with this conversation? And if your intent is, I want to go and tell this person all the things they're doing wrong, you're probably not going to have a great conversation. That person's not going to come out feeling great about it. And I don't want to go into a meeting thinking I'm just going to be told what I'm really terrible and what's bad in the world. So it's no surprise to me that these statistics say that if you are looking at people's strengths and you're focusing on what's going really well, how do we leverage your strengths? How do we really utilize these strengths? And we look at it's not about ignoring the areas that need to be improved, because we're not saying this is the Mary Poppins world. What we're saying is the focus should be on how do we use your strengths to improve in those areas, because that's what needs to happen. You're going to come out going, mate, I'm actually not bad at my job. There are areas I can work on, and my manager's going to help me, and I've got ownership for how I'm going to do that. But it all comes down from what is my intent going into that conversation.
I'm happy that you mentioned that too, Paula, because the skeptics on the line, and I refer back to Bridget talking about the growth mindset as well. The skeptics on the line are going to say, all right, so what, I'm now tree hugging, wrapping them up in cotton wool. I can't focus on their weaknesses. But that's not what we're saying, are we?
I don't go on. Were we going to say something, Paula?
No, you go, Bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. It's how am I approaching this conversation? How am I approaching the environment with this person that's with me? How mindful am I of the language that I'm using with this person? So if I'm going in with intention to support that person and help them to develop and be able to embrace new ways of doing things, perhaps, or whatever it might be that's going to support them to shift performance or perhaps change something in a way that's going to support the weaknesses, if that's what you want to call them, because their strengths are going to set them up for success and to be able to then, find ways of being able to change or shift or lift or change performance in some way, if that's what's required.
Yes, and I see Lisa, that we were hinting that you might jump in. Thank you. One of the most experienced learning and development professionals that I know, probably right up there with you, Paula, up on the upper echelon there. And Lisa says, for sure, the focus on strengths and how they can be leveraged to support growth in other areas is our focus. And I'm hearing some of these key tips coming out already now, Bridget, and it sounds to me what you're talking about is a change in mindset. So we're not talking about going in there to try to fix the person. And we, of course, we have to talk about what we want to see changed, but we're talking about you're using the words lift, raise, shift performance. This is a change in mindset when it comes to how we actually manage these conversations and the language we're using.
I think that essentially, if we're thinking about, there's a bar there, or this is where you're at the moment, if you want to call it a line or a bar, rather than saying, sort of underperformance or poor performance, it's around, well, this is where I'm at. So how do I shift that or change it or lift it somewhat? So understanding everyone's at a certain spot, how do we lift, shift, change, or raise that performance in some way?
I think also it comes back to the GROW model, doesn't it? And we'll talk about this more in our next coaching cafe as well, to show the actual model we're using here. But we're not shirking reality. We're not saying that the performance is not what it is, but I suppose we're stating reality, and then we're using, as Lisa said, more powerful words around, this is where you're at, this is where the expectation is, how do we shift, lift, raise that performance if needed, rather than fix that performance. Now, we're kind of talking about the underperformance here as well, so we will dedicate a coaching cafe to that. But generally speaking, in our performance conversations, we're trying to adopt that growth mindset, that coaching mindset, that these performance conversations are around development. They're not just about banging on and talking about people's weaknesses. And Paula, I know you feel quite strongly about this as well. That means that if we're focusing on conversations, not just a once-off event, then the other tip we have is we really do need to move away from just annual conversations, don't we?
Yeah, this is one of my most passionate places in the annual performance review. And it also comes back to how you're talking about the annual performance review. There's lots of there's normally an overall groan around the organisation when someone says performance review. For HR people, that means we've got a lot of work to do. And for managers, it means it feels like an added pressure because you've got this extra work to do. But in reality, if you are having monthly, fortnightly conversations with your team members, and if as a manager you're asking great questions, by the time you get to the annual performance review, it's just the final conversation in a series of 12 that you've had for the year. And if what you're doing is focusing on strengths, people will be happy to come to an annual conversation, because they know that it's going to be a good conversation. But if you talk about it from the perspective of, oh, I've got all this extra work to do, oh, what a pain it is to fill in all these forms, then that's exactly how your staff members are going to feel about the process as well. And you're already starting from 100 meters behind. Whereas if we're talking about, this is going to be a great opportunity to have this conversation, I want you to really think about what you can bring to this conversation and what you might want to talk about. It changes it instantly from a below the line to an above the line. And if you've been having the regular conversations, it's easy to say, we're just going to finalise the conversations we've had for the year and then start setting ourselves up for the success of the next year.
You know, I love what you say there, Paula, because even for myself, having done this for years and years and years, the thought about actually finalizing the conversation as opposed to book in those 1 hour sessions, like I've got better things to do and this is me, so I like how you say that this is a cumulative conversation, and I actually feel more energized to have our own performance conversations, because we're finalizing an accumulation of conversations, and that counts for high performers as well. So this is not the first time the high performers in the organization have heard about their growth, their development, how they're making a contribution, and how they feel valued. And our performance conversations are a great opportunity. The annual review is a great opportunity for that. It's the accumulation of conversations. That's a really great way of thinking about it as well. We've got a couple of comments coming back here. as well. If a staff member is just not suited to the role, strengths do not align with what's required, you appreciate tips on how to tell them this isn't the right role for you in a positive way. Well, to the person who said that, can you come back in, I think, 2 weeks' time? We have a coaching cafe that's going to be directly focused on coaching to strength. So we will talk about that, the tricky conversations when they're not supported in the role. We'll talk about you know what happens when there's tricky conversations. We'll talk about that as well. And someone's also offered, by the way, there's been a lot of ongoing feedback on what is required. For example, attention to detail, but it's not their strength. Okay, I understand what you're saying there. Let us pick that up in a separate coaching cafe. We've got 2 coaching cafes dedicated to what if we've given a person feedback and they're not getting it. That's the tricky conversations. Also strengths. But can I also ask you to reach out to us and we can have a private conversation about that as well. Thank you. Yeah, feel free, everybody. You're jumping into the Q&A there or you're jumping into the chat. We really do appreciate the conversations as well. Yeah, so I've got another point here for you, and this is what I feel like you're saying as well, Paula, is giving the annual performance conversation the attention and focus it deserves. Now, try not to get on your soapbox here, Paula, because I know that you feel strongly about this as well. Tell us what you're thinking. Okay, get on your soapbox.
All right, I'll hop on my soapbox. But basically this is about looking at it from your own perspective. If your manager doesn't give it any focus, isn't paying any attention to it, how does that make you feel? And then if you translate that into, well, now I'm a manager and I've got people, how would they feel if I wasn't giving it the focus? What does it say about my performance? What does it say about how I feel valued within the organization? So the focus that it deserves, it's not about the ticking the boxes exercise. Put the piece of paper to the side, put the computer program, whatever you're using to record the conversation. What your staff care about is the conversation, not the process.
We just need to pause and have a think about that. Thank you. It's, you know, it is about the conversation, and I totally agree with you. I think sometimes we get caught up with the process, that we have to fill out forms or we have to insert this or we have to do that or whatever it might be. When truly it's about the conversation, allowing people to have that growth, the development, and as you say, feel valued as well. Thank you. Yeah, I know, we're all pausing. You've really made us think, Paula. Thank you. And Lisa has jumped in and says she feels like some people like to hide behind the process, and it might be for some people that's what's dragging them down, but for others they're actually hiding behind it, which is not what we're asking for either.
Yes, it can sometimes look like, oh, well, I wouldn't do it this way, but that's what I have to do.
Yeah.
But it's not actually about it. The steps behind it are less important than the amazing conversation that you have, that the feedback, that the listening you can do about what's important to that person, that's what's really key.
Yeah. And I also think our next key tip as well, I think that the managers take on too much responsibility, actually. The managers feel weighed down by too much responsibility of having to record everybody's achievements and making sure they comment on everybody's achievements. And I know some managers that do this very well. So when they're having the performance conversation, everything's documented, ready to go. It's just, as you say, a capturing or a summary of the achievements. But there's others that haven't been able to do that. Having said that, I feel like it's the employee's responsibility. Bridget, you're really focused on above the line, that people take responsibility and accountability. The above the line approach is in coaching is about options, solutions, accountability, responsibility. So how do you relate to this comment?
Important that when you're setting up a scenario where you're having those regular valuable conversations every month, where they're regular, they're current, You're talking about information that's actually current, not 12 months old, or bits of information that's forgotten. You're building a relationship with that person to buy into that connection and that conversation on a regular basis. So, it's about coaching that person to take responsibility, to think about how they're going to report back, what they're going to do. It's getting the employee to take responsibility for taking action and building upon building upon their own strengths and taking that action to come back to their manager to arrange potentially their monthly catch up. So when people get into the rhythm of doing this, it becomes that's the way we do things. It's that regular conversation. You are important. It does matter what you're doing. I am interested, and it's all about you. So all of these things tie into valuing that person on a regular basis. So yeah, it's building upon their strengths. It's building upon their ability to say, yes, I can, because as the manager, I believe you can. I'm going in with that growth mindset. So it's prompting people up for success.
It makes me also laugh, also, Bridget, because we do really want people to take responsibility, to come prepared to their performance conversations. And I kind of laugh because people say, oh, the younger generations have no troubles with that. They're quite happy to come and, and sprout their achievements. And I'm laughing to myself because I was always very comfortable in performance reviews to sprout my achievements. And I think the reason for that is because I had managers who never really took the time that you and Paula are talking about. So if they weren't going to take the time to list achievements in a performance conversations or think about growth and development, then I had to do that for myself. But I know so many people aren't like that, or they're not confident, or they don't want to blow their trumpet or their horn. And next week we'll hear from an author on the topic as well, Annalie Blundell. But we're not really talking about blowing your trumpet, are we? Aren't we just talking about capturing what's happened and our achievements and how we want to grow and improve? Paula, what do you think? I mean, I think we do need to list our achievements. I'm quite comfortable doing that, but I know a lot of people are not.
I think it comes back to the how are you listing it? If you're blowing your own trumpet, you've overextended it, and it can be more than what it really was. But identifying the things that you have done really well and that where you have really achieved things, it's really a fact rather than a blowing of the trumpet. And when we're looking at that whole manager and staff member relationship, we really want to encourage individuals to have control over what they do, how they do, and what they want to be doing. It sort of links back to that question about the person in the wrong role as well. Is that what we want to be saying to people is you are actively involved in your job. You are actively involved in what happens to you from here. And the more information you bring and the more examples of things that you bring, the more the easier it is for you to be and to be engaged and happy where you are and to move where you want to go as well. So it's sort of about giving the control back and saying you're the master of your own destiny, my friend, and bring the information you've got with you.
Yes, I agree with you. And again, the skeptics on the line, might be skeptical about that, and we can address that in our next coaching cafe. But the word that comes up for me is proud. This is an opportunity to talk about what we're proud of. And as someone points out here, Lynn points out, introverts, as a general classification, if you like, or preference, struggle with this. And I suppose my offer in that case is document it. So, we're able to document our achievements, and the introverts can bring that to the meeting. And then you don't even have to speak it. You can just hand it over as well if you need to, I suppose. So, capturing what you're proud of, throughout the year, I think is a terrific opportunity. Yeah, and documenting it, capturing it. It is, as we say, taking responsibility because it's your review. Yeah. Oh, okay, I'm glad that you like that idea as well. So, using coaching questions, I've started to offer some. We've got the experts on the line generating coaching questions. So, go on, Bridge. Give us. We have to get our notepads out, everybody. It's a good time if you're listening to pause the recording because Bridget's going to give us some coaching questions, and everybody knows that when she starts the roll of coaching questions, we all listen. Go on, hit them with us. What kind of good coaching questions are we thinking about? What are you proud of? What did you achieve? But what else are we thinking about?
I think when these regular conversations happen every month, tell me about all the great things that have been happening for you since we caught up last, and acknowledging all the things that have happened. Perhaps there have been some challenges as well. So we're not only acknowledging that, but we're also we're acknowledging and we're amplifying and we're reflecting on that. So how can we reflect on those achievements, or how can we reflect on that experience, for example?
What have you learned? Yeah, what have you learned? So you've had those experiences, but what have you actually learned this year, or do you feel that how have you grown this year?
Exactly. So once you've sort of elicited all those things that have been happening, it's that key reflection piece. What have you learned? What's changed for you now? What might you do differently moving forward? So there's a number of questions that you can ask. What might you need to do more of, perhaps, given that experience that you've had, or what might you need to do less of? I think those sorts of questions, bringing in questions around strengths, of course, how can you play to your strengths? How do your strengths fit in with the way you're going to approach? What strengths can you take and move forward with, depending on what they need to do, what they're planning to do?
Where could you have the biggest impact? What was your biggest impact in your team, in your role, in the organization this year?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's just me because I'm a nerd when it comes to this. Like, I just feel happy listening to these coaching questions. I'm imagining using these coaching questions during a review, and I feel happy and warm. So maybe I'm just a nerd, but any one of those nearly 20, I think, that you've just randomly listed, and thank you, Paula, for jumping in as well, can make a difference to our performance conversations and how we set those performance conversations up for success. And that's really what our focus is. And I know we're right on time now. So what a great way of finishing our conversation, actually, to say, let's have a think about those coaching questions. Let's have a think about our mindset and how we can really set those performance conversations up for success. So with that in mind, I want to thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being part of our Coaching Cafe today. As always, we say enjoy your coaching, and we have end of year financial specials on, so you can jump in if you've got some spare cash rolling around and you want to coach train your people in Leader as Coach or our certificate and qualification programs. Feel free to connect with us. And as always, we say thanks to you, Paula, and thank you to Bridget and everyone who's jumped in with us today. Enjoy your coaching and stay warm for those of you who are in climates now where we're coming into winter. Let's make performance conversations a bit warmer than the cold weather out there. So all the best to you. We look forward to catching up with you at our next Coaching Cafe.